Well, hey, good evening and welcome back to my garage. Now, the door is usually open so you can see the night sky, but it's getting quite chilly here, and so I've had to close it. And now you can see a different vantage point. There's my desk and my tools and stuff, so hopefully you don't get distracted with my background. Tonight we are going to continue on with our book, our new book that we're working with, Max Lucado's book, Anxious of Nothing. And here we go into chapter 2. Now I'm going to break up chapter 2 into tonight and tomorrow because it's quite a lengthy chapter, but that's fine. I figured out a good place to pause. So let's just kind of jump right into it. So we talked about calm, and the last thing we were talking about with calm, that's celebrate, ask, leave, and meditate, and about celebrating God's goodness, ask God for help, leave your concerns with Him, and meditate on good things. So in this next chapter that we're going to be looking at is the section is celebrate God's goodness, and our chapter we're going to look at is rejoice in the Lord's sovereignty. It says, I grew up in a camping family. My dad's idea of a great vacation involved mountains and creeks and tents and sleeping bags, and let others tour the big cities or enjoy the theme parks. The Lucado family passed on Mickey and headed for the Rockies. I attempted to continue this tradition with my own family. No luck. Our idea of roughing it is to stay at the in-laws. We light campfires, and as long as someone else builds them and room service is available, I'm not as hardy as my dad. He loved camping gear as much as he loved camping trips. One day when I was about 9 years old, he returned from a trip to the Army Supply Store with a tent that became part of the Lucado family lore. It was huge. It could hold 12 cots. We could erect the tent around a picnic table and still have room for sleeping bags. A big tent, of course, requires stable tent poles. This one came with 2. Don't confuse these poles with the slender, retractable aluminum versions that come with average size camping tent. No siree. Bob, these poles were made out of cast iron and were as thick as a forearm. The shelter wasn't fancy, no zipper doors, no mosquito netting, no camouflage design, but it was sturdy. Let the winds howl and let the summer's rain fall, let the hail pound, let the weather change, we weren't going anywhere. On one occasion, we were camping at Estes Park in Colorado, along with Dad's 8 siblings. The sky suddenly grew dark and stormy. Rain popped the ground, and the wind bent the pine trees. Everyone made a dash for their tents. Within moments, everyone left their tents and scampered to ours. It was, after all, the one with the 2 cast iron poles. I'm thinking you and I could use a set of those poles. The world has a way of brewing some fierce winds. Who among us hasn't sought protection from the elements of life? If only our storms were limited to wind and rain. Our tempests consist of the big D's of life: difficulties, divorce, disease, and death. Does anyone know where to find a shelter that is suitable for these gales? Well, the Apostle Paul did. If anyone had any reason to be anxious, it was he. Let your imagination transport you 2,000 years back in time. Envision an old man as he gazes out the window of a Roman prison. Paul is about 60 years old and 30 years as a Christian, and there is scarcely a seaport on the Mediterranean that he doesn't know. See how stooped he is? All angles, all curves. Blame is bent back on the miles traveled and the beatings endured. He received 39 lashes on 5 different occasions. He was beaten with rods on 3, and scars spiderweb across his skin like bulged veins. He was once left for dead, and he was imprisoned, deserted by friends and coworkers, and endured shipwreck, storms, and starvation. He's probably half blind, squinting just to read Galatians 4:15. What's more, he is waiting trial before the Roman emperor. Nero had learned to curry the favor of the Roman citizens by killing believers, of which Paul is the best known. And as if the oppression from the empire weren't enough, Paul also bears the weight of newborn churches. The members are bickering, false preachers are preaching out of pride and envy. So much for the easy life of an apostle. His future is as gloomy as his jail cell. Yet to read his words, you'd think he'd just arrived at a Jamaican beach. His letter to the Philippians bears not one word of fear or complaint. Not one. He never shakes a fist at God. Instead, he lifts his thanks to God and calls on his readers to do the same. Rejoice in the Lord always. And again I say, rejoice. Philippians 4:4. Paul's prescription for anxiety begins with a call to rejoice. Paul used every tool in the box of this verse, hoping to get our attention. First, he employed the present imperative tense, so his readers would hear him say continually and habitually rejoice. And if the verb tense wasn't enough, he removed the expiration date. Rejoice in the Lord always. And perhaps the verb tense and always were inadequate, he repeated the command. And again, I say, rejoice. But how can a person obey this command? Rejoice always? Is it possible for any person to maintain an uninterrupted spirit of gladness? No. This is not Paul's challenge. We are urged to rejoice in the Lord. The verse is a call, not a feeling, but to a decision and deeply rooted confidence that God exists, that he's in control, and that he is good. The apostle held firm to this belief. He had erected cast iron stabilizers in the center of his soul. Let Nero rage, let preachers self-promote, let storms blow. But Paul's tent of faith would never collapse. He had stabilized it with a sturdy belief system. How sturdy is yours? Flip back the flaps of your soul and you'll see a series of beliefs that serve like poles to stabilize your life. Your belief system is your answer to the fundamental questions of life. Your belief system is your answer. Is anyone in control of the universe? Does life have a purpose? Do I have value? Is this life all there is? Your belief system has nothing to do with your skin color, your appearance, your talents, or your age. Your belief system is not concerned with the exterior of the tent, but the interior. It is a set of convictions, poles, all of them unseen, upon which your faith depends. If your belief system is strong, you will stand. If it is weak, the storm will prevail. Belief always precedes behavior. Let me read that one more time. Belief always precedes behavior. For this reason, the Apostle Paul, in each of his epistles, addresses convictions before he addresses actions. To change the way a person responds to life, change what a person believes about life. The most important thing about you is your belief system. It's interesting about how Max Lucado opens up this conversation about the poles and the structure of our belief system. In other conversations about theology, we also look at this being called a worldview, be a Judeo-Christian worldview or a secular humanistic worldview. But it does give you a structure or framing to one's person, to one's character. And I love that the belief precedes the behavior. We don't go to church and get the rule book of here's how to behave as a Christian. One of the core values that we have at South City is to believe, belong, believe, and become. So the belief system that we are wanting to really create well and have theologically rich, because it's those beliefs, those tent poles, it actually gives us the structure to what our life is and how to move in and out our spiritual formation and our life formation. For me, before Christ, or BC, my belief system was very thin. It was very, it was still stunted. It was not growing. It was stagnant. It was basically me, myself, and I. It was based on whatever I can get, whatever self-gratification that I can get for myself, and I didn't concern myself with any other living soul or creature on the planet. So basically, I was the center of my own universe. But then, as I started to live in that belief system, my behavior was in accordance to those structures, to those tent poles. Well, those tent poles were like the aluminum ones. As soon as a strong gust or a storm of life came, I was blown to pieces. I couldn't pull myself out of it. And I started to wrestle with the why. And is this what life is going to be for the rest of my life? So for so many of us that have come to faith, it's because we've realized that the structure or the tent poles of our being were the wrong ones. We were trying to put in, it'll do ones. Maybe bamboo poles, or maybe these will be made out of brick or whatever. But it's the ones that Jesus. It's the ones of faith. And so when I became a Christian and I surrendered and said, "Okay, God, you put your tent poles, your belief, your structure into my life," then my behavior became a byproduct of what I believed. So because I believed that God was holy and that he says in his word that no unwholesome talk should come out of your mouth, that's the reason why I didn't want to swear every second word and use the F-bomb all the time. It wasn't because I was trying to behave into a certain subset group called Christians. It's because God was forming my pole system, my framing, from the inside out. And then over time, my tent did look different. And that's when my non-Christian friends were looking at me going, something's different about you. What's your behavior? Why is it that when I see you, now I see something different? But really, the beginning work was in my heart. The beginning work was those structures of belief. This ties into anxiety. It ties into the storms of life and how we need to rejoice in the Lord always. And really, it's believing in a God that we can rejoice in. So you can't get to rejoicing unless you have a strong tent system, those poles of belief. We're going to unpack a little bit more of this tomorrow morning. But I'm praying for you. God bless you. And ask the Lord, what are the kinds of poles that are holding you up with belief? And maybe by repentance and maybe just by surrender, you need to let Jesus be the center, let Jesus be that pole structure of belief in your life. Oh, God love you, and we'll see you tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. And have a great night. Stay warm, stay safe, stay in your bubbles, and we'll talk to you in the morning.